to this. All right. Hi, Ann. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I'm really excited to turn the tables on you and ask you the hard hitting questions that you usually ask everybody else. But I'd love if you start. A lot of people already know who you are in the NP community, but just for those that don't, I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about how you started, what you're doing now, and how you found yourself in your new role, not new, but your current role, helping other nurses and other nurse practitioners.
Yeah, happy. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. So my name's Ann Konkoly. I'm a certified nurse midwife and a certified life and business coach. And I help nurses live the good life. And my goal is really to do help, in particular, women advanced practice nurses do good work in the world and create good impact, but also do well for themselves at the same time. So I started off in clinical practice. Was caught a lot of babies and did lots of IUDs and LARCs and hormone therapy. And I left my clinical practice in 2019 because I was at a point where I knew it was time to go and to do something different. And it had been kind of creeping up, so to speak, for many years. Prior to that, I'd gone through a couple of rounds of burnout, and I worked as a medical director, and we built a large clinic. I actually think, looking back, that was probably one of those moments where I thought, wow, there's a lot that you can do in healthcare and around healthcare that creates impact, and that also allows you to feel like you're, maybe fulfilling a bigger purpose of yours, which is, this goal to really do something that has maybe a legacy or that really could change healthcare. So, but I left prior to the pandemic and started building my business. And I had done a coach certificate program here at a local at Case Western Reserve University, which is where I got my MBA, and local here in the Cleveland community. And coaching felt like a natural fit for me. It was a lot of the work that I had done as a midwife, a lot of asking questions, a lot of holding space for people, a lot of shared decision making and really supporting decision making. And coaching is very similar to that. So I fell into it naturally. I think midwifery probably for me was just a stepping stone to get into this place. And so now I started off as doing general life coaching for a lot of healers, physicians and registered dietitians and nurses, and then have really transitioned over into doing more business coaching for women advanced practice nurses, so that we can start to take what we do, which is inherently, so good for our communities, it's good for our institutions, it's good for, our families, and take it and do something big with it. So, but I love what I do, and this is, it's exciting to be here at this point.
Yeah, I have multiple questions out of there that came to my mind. So what kind of practice setting were you in? Were you in a collaborative practice setting with physicians? Was it all nurse midwives? What was that kind of setup like? If you're the medical director, it sounds like it was the buck stops with you.
Yes. So I worked in an academic medical practice. We had a large group of midwives, and I think at the time we had maybe 12 midwives, and then a large group of OBGYN generalists, and then large division of gyn-oncs and MFMs and urogyns. And so it was a great practice setting to be in. And I was at Kaiser for a couple of years and liked it. And I realized very quickly that as a more of a community practice and a fantastic model, but I realized for me it just didn't suffice. It didn't satisfy my desire to be kind of in the mix and know what was new and latest breaking, evidence-based medicine and stuff. But we were in a large practice, and I worked a couple days in the office and shared call. I did Thursday night call for many, many years, and then worked as a medical director in a small FTE, portion of my FTE went to that.
I guess it doesn't sound like you moved on because you were so unhappy in what you were doing, but more you were called to something else. But I wonder, what were the things that caused the most burnout for you? Was it the clinical stress of it's so stressful when a baby's being born, you never know what's going to happen, really high stress, high stakes situations, which I definitely get that coming from an anesthesia background. It's a big part of your identity, is something that I always fall back on as well. I still identify so strongly with my anesthesia background. But or was it like you were in this big hospital group? Was it more like the politics of everything? Like what kind of was causing most of your burnout, or maybe it was just the mixture of all those things?
I think that's just about right. I think it's a mixture. And I think for a lot of people, it's a mixture. It's very often, we talk a lot about in my coaching program, we talk a lot about internal and external factors for burnout. And, there's everything that I can do when I walk into a system, right? Like I can, play my pump up tunes and I can make sure I'm, slathered in lavender oil and I've, done my fucking mindset work and like all that, right? Like I have, I can really own what I can do and exert control where I have it. And invest in myself so that when I show up for shift or clinic, that I'm ready to do that work. And so there's that element, and then there's always, and look, I think many of us go through moments in time where, based on family circumstances or political moments, it feels harder to be present in that way, right? To really own that and to show up very powerfully based on other things that are going on in our lives. And then there's always the external circumstances of a position or a job. And I think for many people, when you walk into a system that really is built in a way that's toxic and it's built on the patriarchy. I mean, medicine's built on the backs of the patriarchy. And if you don't understand, why imposter syndrome drives so many advanced practice nurses not to sit at the negotiating table, and then you blame it on the nurse, you miss an entire portion of what most women and most advanced practice nurses face when they walk into that system of toxicity, a system of discrimination, a system that does not have gender pay transparency across the genders, a system that promotes typically white cisgendered men more often than not, and perpetuates that, a system that also has outcomes that support the some shit outcomes, right? Like in terms of the healthcare results, you start to look at maternal morbidity, maternal mortality, infant mortality, and the discrepancies that play out in terms of the groups who suffer the most. And so the system has its own issues, so to speak. And I think for me, it was a combination of both. And I don't sit to place blame on, the system like that. That's not, but, and I realized that there was a moment for me where I thought, look, you either sit in the system, and I have this conversation with midwives all the time because they'll say to me, but how do I know like when it's time to go? And I'm like, well, first of all, if you're asking yourself if it's time to go, it's probably time to go for you, number one. But number two, the other part of this is that you get to choose when you walk in. Are you going to be an activist in the system? Because that's what happens to you when you are in a place of being oppressed or being marginalized or being discriminated against. You have to, in some areas, show up as an activist. Or do you say, I decline, I opt out, and I'm going to build my own business. I'm going to build my own table and really create something that isn't toxic, that doesn't support, that isn't built on this model that just drives people to do more and more and more without recognizing them as humans, without providing them with safety and a culture that's supportive to them. Um, and so I think for me, I think I got to a point where, I could do all that I could in terms of managing my mind and keeping a positive, outlook and then making a choice of this system isn't for me. It doesn't give me the freedom and flexibility to do things the way I like to do them, even in a position of power, right? Because medical director, yes, the buck stops with me, and I still have to answer to, a lot of other people who may not share the same views that I do. And so that's a beauty of building a business, right? Like buck stops with me. I get to choose exactly how this business runs, whether we operate from a place of integrity, whether we operate from a place of safety, whether I create a community and culture of safety within a just culture. I mean, I get to do that. And that wasn't, in my opinion, as easy to do in a big corporate setting. And I think a lot of people go through that and find that over the years, like, oh yeah, I'm probably not going to get into a place of power where I really have the amount of control I desire.
Yeah, when you were talking to it really made me think about this concept of the second victim. When something bad happens and you're a medical provider and you feel responsible, how that is so traumatic and hard on you as a provider, as well. And I think that happens in being in that kind of system, there's a lot of that, and there's usually not an outlet for it. So I'm sure with working with all the providers you do, you probably hear a lot about that, because when there is a poor outcome and you're involved in it, it's like a lot of thoughts and emotions, a lot to work through, and there's
Um,
usually no outlet. It's like you're allowed to make mistakes in every other field, but you're not allowed to make little mistakes. Little mistakes can cause big outcomes, and it's a whole although I
And
will yeah.
there's like not the time to process,
Hmm.
like if you're in a busy practice and you're, witnessing, trauma that occurs to patients and thus that you're subject to on a day-to-day basis, or when do you go home and process that? And what's the employer's responsibility to support you in that journey, and creating the culture where, there's adequate resources for you to feel, human like that. It's,
Right.
we get to this point, I think, where some of the employers, you look at, advanced practice nurses, physicians, I think, are in the same boat, RNs, respiratory therapists. I don't think this is just, the nursing profession, but where, we're not looked at as human first. We're looked at as, employees or workers. And I think that gets to be a slippery slope, because once you deny people the opportunity to be fully human, to have all their emotions, to have the need to process, and like, don't I, people, I like get this comment sometimes, well, like, there's the EAP. I'm like, the EAP doesn't do shit. Okay. Like, I mean, look, like, it's a good start. It's not, it's not the entire picture. Like, we have to treat, you have to treat people like humans first and workers second, because they're humans first and workers second.
Yeah. This is kind of like making a left turn, but just with your background, I heard you mention that you have your MBA as well. And I feel like I hear a lot of um, people saying, like, oh, I want to go get my MBA. I'm wondering, do you feel like that really gave you good practical skills, or who do you think is a good candidate that should go get an MBA, or what do you feel like were your biggest takeaways from your MBA? Because it's a
Well,
time and financial investment.
well, I agree. It's funny in that, I, for many years, looked at my MBA and kind of, if we're being honest, judged myself, like, look at you, you had to go get another degree, and, and go figure out your life, and it's funny. And I really, it's interesting, because an MBA, I think there's good components to it. And I think a lot of that information we don't get when we certainly don't get it in nursing school. Many of us don't get it in, undergrad or in our master's programs. And so, from the standpoint of understanding healthcare as a business, I think it can be useful in understanding the basics of finance and, profits and loss, and, being in the black and the red and ROIs and all that shit. I think there's a lot of value in that. For me, the best part of my MBA, though, was my course called Living the Good Life, which was about entrepreneurship. And, I wouldn't have taken that course if it was Entrepreneurship 101. It was called, though, Living the Good Life. And I wanted that. I didn't know what it was, but I just knew I wanted it. And so, from that standpoint, my MBA was if we're looking at kind of over the steps that I'd taken, it was a great step for me, because it introduced me to something I thought that really wasn't available to me, and made it very approachable, and really, planted a seed that it could happen, and it could be, if it was possible for other people, it could be possible for me. So I think, so now looking back, I say, wow, my employer paid for, oh, maybe 20 out of 50 or 20 out of 45 grand, something like that, so I got some tuition assistance, which was great. But for me, I look at it and say, all right, 3 years part-time work, you're away from your family 1 or 2 nights a week, and 25 grand, out of my pocket. and an additional year of service. I had to stay there for, I think, a year after I received the last payment for tuition reimbursement. Was it worth it? And I would say absolutely. I mean, I don't know if I'd be here today if I hadn't taken that class. I'm not quite sure. I might still be a miserable cow, like, going to work I don't know. And so for me, I think it was a good investment. I think with anything, and I do a lot, it's funny, I used to do a lot of coaching in the beginning on this for some of my clients, which was that, think about it this way. If you want to become, right, like if you're in a place where you're stuck, take the next best step, right? And for some of you, that may include an MBA, and you may be willing to invest in the time and the money and the energy to do it. And good for you, take the next step and keep going and figure it out. For some people though, and this is, and I think I was so stuck that method worked for me. Now I do a lot more conversations about where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? Because I don't know that I thought about it that way. Like, where do I want to be in 5 years? What do I want to be doing? How many hours do I want to work? What kind of money do I want to make? What kind of schedule do I want? And so I think now what I say to people very often is, it's like a gap analysis. Where am I today? Where do I desire to be? And it's painful. Like for a lot of people, visioning work and really thinking about where do I want to be in 3 to 5 years and putting a goal on paper, it takes everything out of them. They're like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I just feel so hard. Like, no, this is a vital step. Create on paper or in your mind, however, or verbally, your idea of where you want to be. And then we go back and say, is an MBA help me get there? Does a PhD help me get there? Does a, coach certificate program help me get there? Then we say yes or no. That it just I think it improves the decision-making strategy. It makes it so much easier. And I also recognize too, again, kind of depends where you are. I was so far in a funk, like with my head up my ass and the throes of burnout that I could not, I just knew I needed something different, but I kept saying, I don't know what I want, but I know this isn't it.
Mhm.
And so for me, my step was just to say, all right, maybe I'll try an MBA. And I really went to MBA school because I was like, maybe management's for me, because I don't want to be in clinical practice, but maybe management's for me. And then I got in there and I was like, no, this is terrible. Oh my God. It's like, I am not a manager of people. This is not the rule. This is the work. And I also knew I don't like to manage people. I like to coach them. I don't want to be responsible for, holding people to policies and procedures so that they can, fulfill KPIs and make sure HEDIS scores are up and for us to get reimbursement. I was like, I want to coach them so that they can do whatever they need in their brains in order to show up in a way that's really powerful, that's going to benefit an entire department or unit or organization. So that's a roundabout kind of long winded answer, but I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. I think it just depends on where you are, right? Is it going to support you? If you can sit down and create that vision, then we can work backwards and say, does it help me get there? Yes, no. And then if not, I think the other question is, does it help me get further down the path of understanding what I like, what I want to do, what's best for me? Then I would say it sounds like it could be a good investment for you.
I feel like that's pretty much great entrepreneur 101 guidance, which is like begin with the end in mind, which sounds so simple. It sounds like, well, duh. But I can tell you, like, I didn't start my entrepreneurship journey with the end in mind. I felt like I grew to grow and succeeded to succeed, not with, it's really easy to say I'm doing this for more time with my family or flexibility or whatever. But it's really easy to not receive that out of entrepreneurship. So designing the life you want, and that's why I do love that you're saying living the good life, because it's really, that's what it's about. I mean, do you feel like, are you there? Do you feel like you're like, okay, that's it, I've achieved it, I'm living the good life?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm home for my kids. I'm home for my family. I do work that I love. I travel. I love this life. There's so many elements, and it's not terribly, it's a lot. It's different than what I was doing. It's not a ton different, right? Because what's always interesting, we change, you and I both know about circumstances. We start to change view and mindset work and right. And, changing, circumstances, right. I always talk about like, you can, like we first bought our house, it was this like ugly beige, it was this ugly light brown color, in fact. And I couldn't stand it. I just didn't like this house when we bought it. But this house made sense for a lot of reasons and it had good bones. And we thought, all right, fine. And so, what do? You get manage your mind around driving into the brown house, 7 days a week. Well, there's a brown house. Okay. And then, right. And what happens? Eventually you're like, all right, well, I either manage my mind around the brown house or I paint it. And right. But what's interesting is that if you're like, oh yeah, but I really love how a white house with black trim looks. And I'm gonna update like the light fixtures on the outside, like their little earrings on the side of the doors. And I'm gonna create this gorgeous, front door entry with a beautiful curb appeal and put a beautiful little Halloween mat on with little ghosts on it. It says boo on it. And then you're like, oh, I love it. And you're like, it's the same damn house.
Yeah.
What happened, right? Well, we did change circumstances. We changed the color of the house, right? It's just objective data. We also changed our thinking. We got in alignment more with what we like. And it's a lot easier to do that. So I think, oh shit, I got into the brown house and the white house and I just lost all track of where I was going and why the story even came up. Please remind me.
I'm like really impressed with the visualization. Visualization is not a weakness of yours because you were down to the mat, but it was kind of like, are you at the good life?
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, you're right. So
Changing
I think
circumstances, but the thought process is still
yeah. And
most important.
And I think that, so it's kind of thank you for bringing me back on track. I think, yes. So I think it's a mix. It's kind of a mix of both. It's a little bit about, like there were elements of my life that were amazing then. Catching babies, there was a time when that was really my version of living the good life.
Mhm.
And then there was a time when it wasn't. And why? Well, circumstances kind of change. Some of the policies change, some of the data changes, right? Some of the thinking changes, some of the trauma, right? New trauma, I haven't met a nurse or a healthcare practitioner, provider, clinician, whoever that hasn't been through some element of trauma, exposed to trauma on the job. So I think, I think some of that stuff kind of changes, but I think for me, the key is, I've had many times in my life of, living the good life, what I would call. And so my kind of goal is always to know when am I not in that space and when am I in that space, because that's the space I like to be in. And life is a lot easier when I'm in that space. The thinking is just a lot, clearer. But no, right now, this is work I love. This is work that I think is going to change healthcare. This is work that it has such tremendous impact for, nurses and for our community and for our profession. And so that feels so amazing to be able to do that level of work that supports, the people in our community and our profession. That feels so satisfying to me. So
That's awesome. I do want to hit on that. We are having you come talk at the APP Aesthetics Conference in Orlando this upcoming April, and we're like just so thrilled about it. And the thing is, you can't help but listen to you and pick up so many practical tips of things to do. Literally every time I talk to you, you give me some amazing tip that I implement. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's genius. Why didn't I think of that? Sorry, that's my dog. But so I'm just so thrilled for you to get to share your knowledge and like your vision and connect with the people that are going to be there and speak to the good life. And I think that everybody is we'll just get so many takeaways from that. So thank you for doing that. And I hope you're excited to come connect and speak there too.
oh yeah. And I think, what's better than getting a bunch of, nurses who want to run the world, who literally want to run the world together in a small space, in a space, I just think that's so fun. And I can't wait to be a part of it. I love to, I like to inspire, people. I like to inspire change. I like to motivate. And I love the idea, right? That we could sit in that room, that conference area with those people who come to this event. And I love the fact, Cassie, that there may be something that you say or that I say, and that spurs someone else on to go and live in a way that really works for them, and to then go out and to create tremendous impact. And I mean, like, to me, that feels like I'm winning. And I like to win a lot. And that feels like in my body, it feels like winning, and so I'm pumped. I'm excited to come. I think this is a great opportunity. There's so many people who I think look at aesthetics and see an opportunity to create a practice or a business that really works for them and that they're interested in. And I mean, there's no there's no shortage of data to support that. The
But yeah,
aesthetics
it is really skyrocketing. The
just
AM,
exploded.
yeah, like the state of the market report stuff is just projecting med spas to be multiplying over the next decade. Like this is getting way more mainstream, which is amazing. One thing when you were talking, I was thinking is I think one thing that we share is this mentality of wanting to share success and have success not only for ourselves but to bring as many people as possible along with us to, and that it shouldn't be as rare as it is in this world. And I think that is the community that we're really trying to foster um, with this conference, is that mentality of abundance, and that this field is exploding, and like come on in. Like what where there's a shortage of is people who understand business, and there's a shortage of people who are truly skilled injectors, because the education that's out there is pretty piss poor. And um, there's no regulation on these programs. There's nothing that makes you be accredited or certificate program. So I see a lot of poor injectors out there and they don't know. And so it's like, invest in yourself, get the skills, get the network, because having a network in this when you're running your own business is the most valuable thing, because the highs are high and the lows are low. I think sometimes I get more stressed about a poor aesthetic outcome than I would about a poor anesthetic outcome, like much more objectively severe. But it is different when it's truly your baby. So yeah, I think having this community when I have a tough case or a tough day or a good day, sharing it, and the connection that you have with other entrepreneur women is so genuine. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
this is your true passion. It's like when you have a baby and all you want to talk about is how much it slept last night and how many ounces it ate. Like nobody wants to hear that, or there's a point that people don't want to hear that anymore. But when you're in this community, it's all they want to talk about too. And it's your true passion. It's a cool thing to share, deeper, I think, than what I shared with my other CRNA compadres, even. So anybody who wants to come in and join that, we're here for it.
Yeah. And I think it's nice too to have, the setting where you can have, excuse me, those conversations, and you can have, the support of people who get it. And I very often run into, in terms of whether it's my friend group or, my partner or, my family or the people who just don't get it, and they don't get that sense of, desire of creating something and growing and working on something, right? Like, I think one of the hallmarks of what we do is just not being afraid to iterate and continuous process improvement, and using scientific method, what worked, what didn't, what am I going to do differently next
But that
time?
sounds like code word for some failures in there.
Yeah, of course, but
And that's okay. Yeah.
oh, yes, and I think to be, it's like it's funny, even I was just talking about this with one of my clients, and she said, I think I'm going to stop sharing with my partner about how my revenue, kind of the ups and downs, because She was like, my partner can just not handle it. And I was like, that sounds like it's probably wise. Like pick and choose, right? Like what kind of relationship you want to have with your partner. And if you want it to be romantic, like talking about the finances of your business, so it's probably exciting to you or not bothersome to you because you have a tolerance for failure and you have, worked your mindset to
Risk
be
tolerance, it's a part of entrepreneurship. You have
to
to
have
have some level of it.
right. Yeah. But like if that's not the relationship that, you want your spouse or your partner to have with you, or you find that for you it's tolerable and for them it's not, probably is time to make a choice about whether or not you want to continue, to be intentional about how you want to use that relationship. And so I find too, it's nice to be around people who they're not afraid to invest. They're not afraid to think big. They're not afraid to try new things. I mean, that's, because I think that's when, we talk about mindset and creating these belief systems and stuff. And when you start to surround yourself, I have interviewed so many people on the podcast who talk about this as well, about you put yourself in the room of people who think like you do, because it is so much easier to operate in this world of entrepreneurship, again, being very risk tolerant, not risk avoidant, but very risk tolerant. Put yourself in that kind of mindset, because otherwise, I mean, hell, it is not surprising why, you look at like the number of restaurants that fail year one. It's like 80% of restaurants fail, brick and mortars fail year one. Why? Well, I would imagine because you get down a path where it feels like you can't fix it. And what happens? You don't reach out for help. And then what happens? Your costs are skyrocketing and you're not able to look at it. How do we change the model and how do we pivot? And so don't be, so it's not surprising, I think, that so many people get into it and then they quickly get out of it because it's just not, they don't have the community support, they don't have the mindset, they don't have just that, built up tolerance for doing the scary shit, which I think we're very good at because many of us do it in our, have done it in our nursing careers, right? It's like, it's shoulder dystocias for the midwife. It's IUDs and vulvar biopsies and EMBs for the WHMP. It's, I don't know, epidurals and whatever shunts and whatever crazy like shit you guys do over the anesthesia world. Like right, it takes time to become the person who can very comfortably say, bring on the shoulder dystocia, I'm ready for it. Bring on any vulvar biopsy, any EMB, any IUD, any next one removal, I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah,
just developing that.
yeah. It's hard to, and buried in there too was this idea of like accepting sunk costs, accepting mistakes, and then learning and moving on, because I've learned every lesson, it feels like, the hard way. And that's why I share those things with me, because I'm like, guess what? You don't have to make this exact same mistake. You will still make your whole list of mistakes and you'll share them with me, and then I won't make that same mistake. And this way we can all get wiser in the business aspect. But the other biggest thing is just that you said is think big. That's the thing we're the most guilty of, is not thinking the sky is a limit, not thinking if what you want is to, have a multi-chain, multi-million dollar med spa, you can have that too. That doesn't have to be your version of success. Your version of success could be having a side hustle where you connect with other women and you pay for one vacation a year. All those things can be available to you. It's just designing what that good life is for you. But, I love hearing you say that you're going to change the healthcare system, because you can. And who can't is the person who doesn't believe that it's possible. And it's hard to open up your mind to that. So I just love that that's where your head is at.
Yeah. And Cassie, I think just building on that, it's like, if you were the person who's blessed to have big ideas, this is listen very carefully to what I'm going to say to you, which is that if you have big ideas, you have them for a reason, and they've come to you for a reason. And if it weren't possible, you would not have had the big idea, the big vision. So many people, I think, walk around with like, I have the next best idea, or I have this big idea of how we could change it, or this is the service, or this is the product, and they don't do anything with it. And I think, so on the flip side, so think big. If you are the person who tends to like take the next step, one step at a time, allow yourself to think big. If you're the person who's blessed with having an ability to be creative and envision and be futuristic, then use it. use it as one of your strengths. So use it, consider how you could use that to your advantage. And, so I think it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah. You can love doing your work. You can love going to work. I never thought that. I thought that was like some BS that was sold to us that was more so meant to make us feel not happy with what we had, which was pretty good, right? But now that I have that, I'm like, oh, this is real.
Yeah.
And everybody you can have that. It takes a lot of work. I think just on ending, kind of where can people find you? How can they connect with you? Just kind of any last thoughts you want to make sure that you get out there for the, handful of people who may watch this.
Yeah, I think if you're thinking about going down to the conference, I think stop thinking and just go get a goddamn ticket. Like just buy a ticket and go. I think it's so reasonably priced. And I think if you start to consider, if you want to talk about being, the med spa owner who starts a franchise model, and all it starts with is becoming an injector and doing a training and coming into a conference like this, like what does that cost you? I don't know, 2,500. We're talking about $2,500 for a possibility of a million. I mean, I don't know if like we were walking down the street and somebody was like, hey, if you give me 2,500 bucks, I'll give you a million back in cash. And you would just like look them in the face and be like, it's just not possible. But that's what happens, right? When you start to think bigger, you start to invest, you start to, consider what you could do. And so I think if people are on the fence about going, I think, again, come back. Is it the next right step for me? Or, if you're the bigger visioning person, is this feel like for me, it's the direction I want to go? Because if it's been calling to you for the past 2-3 years, and you're like, I just really think injectables is super cool. And I just love like transforming the face, and I love the art portion and the creativity behind it. Like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. There's people who need you. They're looking for you. They need you right now.
They do. Yeah,
And
you're
and
making people feel better, which there's
they
very few areas of medicine that we truly get to do that.
right. And so do it. I mean, I think that's stop thinking, start doing. That's the bottom line. But people can reach me on my website. It's www.annkonkolycnm.com. And then a lot of people find me on Facebook for the Side Hustles for APRN's Facebook group. And we do tips in there and share side hustles. And I get in there and just give some advice and then post any of the trainings and online courses that I built that I think would be supportive to the community. But yeah,
I've personally seen you really transform a number of careers for nurses. One of my friends is a living, breathing example of it, and which is amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me, and I look forward to seeing you in person here in a few months.
Wait, well, we can meet in person. I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. It was so nice to chat with you and to see your business grow. And I feel really lucky and just privileged to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye, Ann.
Bye.